the proceedings, plus the fact that you received the press advisory on the 16th of this month. So I'm sure you all have lots of questions. So without much ado, let me ask my colleague Oliver to say a few words before we pass on the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just say the following before saying a few other things. First of all, I think it really gives me much pleasure to be here. I think this is an opportunity for us to tell you what we are doing and also what has happened in the last couple of days in terms of the conference that we've had. In terms of really the rationale of this conference, today, as you are aware, African continent faces a major. I need my glasses. Thank you very much. I needed this quickly because I was not able to. Thank you. The African continent faces major pressing issues: climate change, changing water scarcity, energy shortage, environmental stresses, food crisis, land rights, which affect citizens, business, and community at large. All these challenges constitute of coherent, seamless, and up-to-date spatial-enabled information is essential and precondition for setting up a coordinated policy and strategy. Though geospatial information does not yet arouse political interest, it is of the basic infrastructure for sustainable national development and economic growth. It is now time in Africa to maximize the accessibility of spatial data and use spatial information technologies in government to day-to-day business processes and service delivery in order to give closer linkage between geospatial information products and societal needs as land governance and management. In terms of the issues and challenges that we're facing, land is a key to food security, as you know, and the social-cultural needs of most communities in Africa. Land is foundation for all human activities. And therefore, it has also been established during the last couple of days that the performance of most sectors of the economies of African countries is indeed tied to that of the land sector. The management of this sector must therefore be accorded priority attention in all countries in order to unlock the overall performance of national economies. This is best done through the comprehensive land policies developed to address all these cross-sectorial needs and the unique circumstances of the countries. In terms of what we are doing at the center, in particular the United Economic Commission for Africa, on land management, just to mention that in 2007, the Commission set out an exercise to develop some guiding principles to govern land management and information systems in Africa. You may also be aware that the 13 global principles give an overview of some of the broad concepts that system designers, managers, users, and decision makers should routinely bear in mind in regard to land management information system. I must also mention that the principles are contained in the publication entitled Land Management Information Systems in the Knowledge Economy, which points out on Africa's unique circumstances regard to the application of technology and modern as well as land management information systems. This includes the types of interests associated with land in Africa, the low levels of readiness, limited levels of technology and literacy, and cultural and attitude barriers and lack of information. Now, what has been the main focus in terms of what has actually happened in the last couple of days, just to mention a few? The forum, as you know, it brought a number of experts, managers, international partners, governments, private sector, to brainstorm and to learn from each other on how we can promote innovative policies in making land information system sustainable development agenda for Africa. The forum also aimed at reviewing what we already know about land administration mechanisms and practices throughout Africa and also in other parts of the world. How do we relate to each other in order to build upon what has been achieved at international level? Now, in terms of going forward, from here out when we leave this this conference, I think, as you know, the forum has not attempted to propose a one-size-fits-all land governance regime for Africa. What we think and hope is that we'll come up with guidelines that we can draw on for future initiatives to ensure that we have a proper land management and governance to help our governments in the country. The need for information or more precise knowledge will remain paramount in respect of existing land policy or management regime, and this information gives a value addition when it can be represented partially. Going forward, the desire for management information system will remain on the table for as long as human exists. In terms of the recommendation, I think it's our hope that whatever comes out of this forum would not necessarily remain on the shelves, but to be used by our governments to be able to develop and organize development programs in the countries to address a number of issues that are challenged in terms of poverty reduction, as well as other issues using the spatial data information structures. I think briefly, I'll end it here and leave it for other colleagues to fill in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Now, let me pass the floor to Mr. Sultan Mohammed, who is the co-chair of the United Nations Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here this morning to give a brief statement on what has been going on with regards to the fourth high-level forum on United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management that has taken place in our country, in our capital city, Addis Ababa, for the last 3 days. This forum has been a very successful and enlightening forum for most of us, the participants in this forum. The issues raised in the forum were, for all of us, we had the opportunity to learn from each other from the issues raised. We have had, as mentioned by my colleague Oliver, we have had high-level panelists, experts in the discussion forums, through which very important papers were presented and were discussed. And through this, we came to come together and learn together that the importance of land for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is essential, that good land governance is essential for good governance in general, that unless particularly our continent, Africa, adheres to good land governance, the implementation and attainment of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals will be fairly difficult, maybe unattainable in that respect, because as Oliver rightly said, land is our major resource. We repeatedly say, next to our human resource, land in Africa is our major resource. It's our source of, it can be the source of our wealth, well-being, development, or it can be, if not managed properly, the source of conflict and devastation. So we in Africa, for us, land administration is a very important and key issue. That's why we suggested that when the fifth session of the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management, the Committee of Experts, decided to the theme of the fourth high-level forum to be good land governance. That's why we offered to host this forum in Africa and in Ethiopia in particular. So it was a good forum. We have had, it was a successful forum from its beginning onwards, and it was a good opportunity for us, for Ethiopia, for the UNECA, to showcase our capabilities to host such important forums. Besides that, it was a good opportunity for the experts, particularly in Ethiopia, who might not have the opportunity to travel to attend such forums, to come together with experts, international experts in this respect, exchange ideas, come to learn from each other, and have the opportunity to attend such fora. So that was a very important and successful forum, I would say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll now pass the microphone to Mr. Lee Pendage, the correct pronunciation, who is the co-chair of the Committee of Experts.
Yes, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to say congratulations to our UN society to have such important, very successful high-level forum on land administration policies, technologies, and solutions. And also, we should say thanks to EC, to Ethiopia government, especially your president. He was very busy, but attended our opening and also gave very good investigation to different bushes for technology, service, and companies. With this type of very strong support for President, geoinformation will play more and more important role in your planning work, land administration, and constructions, and also for environment. It's also a good symbol to show other countries geoinformation is becoming more and more important than before. I think I learned from this conference, geoinformation is like air. Everyone needs. Without air, no one can live. Without good geoinformation, no government can make good decision. No people can have a better life, better development. That's why geoinformation is getting more and more important. Especially for this type of forum, this time we take the good governance of land, because land is always the first resources to the human being. All the things we need is to develop the land. What our environment change is also rely on land. That's why good land governance will benefit our economy, our social life, and the people's living standard. That's why very, very important. From this forum, I want to say there are still many things we have to do. The first one is make geoinformation equally to every country. Every country needs the capacity to use geoinformation, to use technology for their central planning, for the social activities, for the industry development. This equality, I think, is the first important thing for UN, for our expert team to keep forward. The second one is the sharing. We are in the sharing economy time. Everything we can share it. The data get from satellite should be shared. The other censored data with the internet or Internet of Things should be shared. All the people using information to create information, this type of information also should be shared. Also the technology. With the internet supported society, share is the most important thing. How to share the technology, the data, that can make the equality of geoinformation to other countries. The third one is cooperation. Because country to country, region to region have different levels of development. But the technology can be shared. The data should be equally accessible. But now the data sometimes is still very expensive. How we can ask the private sectors to reduce the price, the technology providers to give more economic solutions. In this way, I think country to country should have a better cooperations. Companies to government also should have a much better cooperations. So all this type equality, sharing, and cooperation should be based on UN-GGIM's coordination. That's what we are doing in the future to push this forward. By the way, as a Deputy Director General of National Administration of Survey Mapping in China, China has always paid attention on Africa's development with buildings and schools and medical service. But the survey mapping is not enough. We will do our best in the future to try to use the Chinese technology, Chinese data for Africa to improve the capability of our countries in Africa. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Now, just to recap briefly, some of the issues that were discussed during the 3 days forum includes land information for sustainable development, good land governance and regulatory frameworks, geospatial land information management, technology and capacity development, and shared objectives and partnerships. So the floor is open. Please identify yourself and the media you represent, and then you can ask a question. And you can ask any of the panel members here. Thank you.
Very much. My question is regarding to the fourth level, high-level forum, which is under discussion for the last 3 days. What benefit does this forum bring to local, regional, and global as well? And what are the contribution of geospatial information to realize the SDG targets across the continent? Thank you very much.
Which media do you represent?
It's from Ethiopian agency.
Okay. Could take one more. Yes, please.
My name is Yared Gabramudin from the Ethiopian Herald. I have 3 questions. My first question is on good governance. As we know, good governance is a problem in many countries, especially in Africa. So, isn't it difficult to apply this good land governance in a situation where there are good governance issues that should be solved? What are the things that you raised regarding good governance? This is my first question. And the other thing is, what are the future technologies that this geospatial information handling should see in the future? What are the better and the priority technologies that Africa should follow? And the third one is, land accessibility is still a problem in many countries. So in what way does this forum helps or improves on land accessibility in many countries? These are my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Since you asked 3 questions, I'll allow the panel members to respond before we proceed to the next set. Shall I start with Oliver? Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I think the last question that he asked is very close to what the first colleague asked the question, in terms of how does this forum contribute on the region as well as globally. I mean, I think first of all, what should be appreciated, what has come out of this forum is it's a good understanding of what we need to do in Africa in terms of land management. And then that's very, very clear. And I think it provides the guidelines to governments to come up with regulations that to regulate the management and the planning and administration of the land. So one hopes that the ministers and experts that were here, they will be able to contribute in formulating the right regulations, if you like, rather statistical legislations or land legislation that will be able to administer land. So I think this is a good start. As you know, we have land issues on the continent, and a number of them that still need to be addressed. And I think this gives us an opportunity to leapfrog to be able to come up with the proper legislation to govern land management. So in terms of how does it inform the SDGs, again, as you know, we have a very long agenda on SDGs, and I think what comes out of here, again, coming up with better formulations, better management, better technologies that will be able to inform the data that is required for the SDGs. And that somewhat that also responds to the question that the second colleague asked, the last question that the last colleague asked. In terms of technology for Africa, this has been also a learning opportunity. We've seen a lot from the exhibitions. We also heard a lot from the panelists of the available technology that is there. I think it's all out for Africa now to go and grab this technology to manage and use them to manage our own resources on the continent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sultan.
I'll say a few words in addition to what Oliver has just said. Regarding the benefits of such forums. This is the fourth high-level forum since the establishment of the Committee of Experts of the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management. The purpose of such fora is to bring together stakeholders, industry stakeholders, member states, professionals, academia, to bring them together to discuss on the role and importance of geospatial information for development in individual countries, in regions, and in the globe in general. So the main benefit that comes out of such forums is the declarations, the recommendations that are being made, and of course, the United, as a UN high-level forum, the recommendations need to be taken up by individual governments for implementation. So it was a good opportunity. The high-level forum involves ministers from member countries. In this fourth high-level forum, we're opportune to have some 8 ministers who engaged in policy dialogue regarding land-related issues, and this was a very important dialogue. And it is hoped that the ministers will take home the output of such dialogue and such discussions that were held in the forum. Further to that, experts also learn from each other in such fora. Experts learn the experience of other countries. What other countries? If we are maybe attending some of the sessions, most of the presentations were referring to experiences in regional experiences, country experiences. The purpose of such presentations is to share the experience among members, so that members can learn from each other. Regarding governance issue raised by our colleague from the Ethiopian Herald, we in Africa recognize that governance is a very significant problem for our, a challenge for our development. And from this, we also understand that land is one of the areas where good governance is lacking. So there is no disjoint between good governance in general and good land governance in particular. The two are complementary to each other. If there is good land governance, then this will evolve to good governance in general. So good land governance is complementary to good governance in general. And if we succeed in good land governance, then the opportunity to succeed in good governance in general will be very high. So I think the most important good governance area that we need to tackle is good land governance. Regarding future technologies, Oliver has also mentioned that there were lots of technologies, technological opportunities that were presented. As Africans, in all the forums we have been attending, we have been pushing the idea that it is required to build the capacity of institutional capacity, human resource capacity of African countries, so that Africa will not be left behind in the geospatial industry. In order to not to encounter or to come again into the geospatial divide, like we were talking about always, the digital divide. So now, our friend Dr. Lee just mentioned that geospatial information is like becoming like air. Everybody needs it for planning purposes, for monitoring purposes, for measuring purposes. We need geospatial information. If we are left behind in this geospatial information, then we'll not be able to properly plan, to properly measure, to properly evaluate our progress at all. So the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, if you take the Ethiopian example, the Ethiopian particular case, our growth and transformation plan, the measurement, the evaluation, and the detailed planning will be literally impossible without the proper use of geospatial information. So geospatial information is now becoming a very important development infrastructure, an essential development infrastructure. So we cannot live without it. Like rightly our colleague Dr. Lee said, it's becoming like air for development planning. So that's what I just wanted to add into that.
Thank you. Dr. Lee, you want to say a few words?
I want to say several words about. The first one is, I have been in Africa for 4 countries: Morocco, South Africa, and Egypt, and this Ethiopia. I have the feeling Africa is really the virgin land for human being. It's rich of natural resources, rich of good air, and rich of different culture of different countries. This piece of land should be very creative in the future. Africa getting a little bit light because of the technology change we didn't get step with. But now the internet technology, the next generation of power grid of the world, all this will change the economy, the governance, and the people's life. For example, in Africa, we can have more green power to export it with the next generation of power grid of the globe, then easily to ship, to export our power to other countries of the other part of the world, and also our other resources, especially for agriculture. I don't think hunger is longer in Africa because there are so big piece of land, only thing is didn't developed. If we have a good planning of the land to develop it, everyone can have enough food, enough life standard. That's very, very important for geoinformation, especially for land governance. As Sultan said, what it means governance? I think there are several things we should mention. The first one is good planning. Without good planning of Africa land, there's no good development. But this type of planning should be worked together, not by only one country. Should by more countries, all member countries of Africa continent. Second one is the tenure system. Everyone rely on land. How can we protect every family's right on land to give them living, give them productive, give them leisure life? That's also important. That's the government need to do, make equal accessibility for every family to land. The third one is regulation. We have a plan, we have tenure. If some land are not correctly developed, how can we make a fine? How can we make the regulation? Even using legal power to treat. That's why the regulation should be legalized. Also science-based. In this way, planning, tenure, and the regulation, the three things together, all the land will be in good condition for use. And the preserved land in good condition for ecology, for environment. That's why good governance for this virtual land of Africa is very, very important. With the new technology of geoinformation, we can catch up with all the developed world because we have the new technology, new network. We can access all the satellite images. In this way, Africa has the new chance in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. I must, first of all, before we proceed, send my apologies to other panel members who are sitting here next to me. I couldn't read the names, and I wasn't advised that they were part of the panel. So please forgive me for this oversight. I think then in that case, before we proceed, I'd like to ask them to, at least each one of them, to make a brief statement, and then we can continue. Perhaps beginning right here. I can't read your names from here, so please introduce yourself.
And I don't want to prolong this. You have heard a lot. I just wanted to say thank you to the Ethiopian government and to ECA for hosting this and giving us this opportunity. This is a very important topic for the UN. It's actually a baby for the UN. The UN has celebrated its 70th anniversary last year, but this GGIM only existed for 5 years. And it is a very important topic that is recently coming up. I'm very proud and very happy to be here from New York because it's also a celebration of the international community. We have here Africa, of course, prominently. We have Asia represented, and Latin America and Europe and the other regions, North America. So it is a classical example how the United Nations brings everybody together. What I always call the convening power of the United Nations, and I think for this topic of geospatial information, it's particularly important that we bring, the United Nations provides the platform for bringing not only all the countries together from all over the world, and this meeting is a beautiful example for this, and Dr. Mohammed mentioned the importance of exchanging experiences. It's also not only the governments, it's all the players, it's all the stakeholders, and that is very important that we do not only have governments here, we have research institutions, academia, we have the private sector, we have non-governmental organizations. So, I mean, this is a very important and successful platform for discussing this very important topic, which is critical for the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Tim Trainer. I'm from the United States. I'm representing in the United States. I'm within the Department of Commerce, and I run the geography program at our statistical office, the Census Bureau. I think that what's really important in what we've observed in having this high-level forum, the fourth high-level forum here in Africa, is that this is the first time we've had it in Africa. And I think all of us were very excited in the original planning for this event. I think all of us are really pleasantly surprised at the number of countries that responded positively to participating in this event. We have over 30 countries within Africa that are here, as well as many other countries from around the world that are here. And in those cases, for some of us, this is our first time to Ethiopia. For others, it's the first time to Africa. And I think that this is also a good indicator for the sharing of information. If you were to go out onto the floor in those intervening breaks and at lunchtimes and in the evenings, the number of folks that are engaging with each other, there's real synergy on the topics. They're sharing experiences, they're sharing their woes, they're trying to find a way out of their current situations, trying to improve on their current situations. I think that's all important as we go forward with the work that's happening on this expert committee for geospatial information. I would not do the right thing if I didn't say something about the work that I do, particularly in the context of why we're here in Africa, and that is that we had several side events prior to the Wednesday beginning of this exercise, and one of those side events dealt with the 2020 round of censuses. And one of the reasons why I thought it was important to have that particular event is that that will be one opportunity for all countries to be able to collect some of the data that just doesn't exist in order to respond to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we're all working hard to move in that agenda. So I think that if you were to look at all of the different topics within this particular high-level forum, they're all connected in one way or another. And so at the end of the day, I think we all benefit from the engagement that we have. We all are working toward a direction forward. And I think that this fourth high-level forum has been very successful in accomplishing that. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rolando Campo. I am a co-chair of UN-GGIM, and I come from Mexico. I am from the National Institute of Statistics and Geography. And just to give the importance of this high-level forum, let me tell you that we have the assistance of 400 participants and that came from 67 countries. So at least 30, as Tim Trainer said, come from Africa, but we have representatives from Europe, from Australia, from America, from Asia. So all the world is here together just to work in this Good Land Government's high-level forum. And I would like to say the importance of this geospatial information that is playing now in the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, we last month in March, in the Statistics Commission, all the sustainable the indicators and the goals were approved by the Statistics Commission, and in that meeting 2 weeks later, there was approved a working group in geospatial information to be in the context of the following of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is very important for us. This is very important for the world. This is very important for the planning and the decision makers that they want to know, to incorporate all the statistics into the map, to incorporate all the geospatial information for the environment, for the poverty, for all the issues of for the development and the global land and land governments. So this is very important now, and this is the role that geospatial information is playing now. It's always is growing and going on. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. My name's Stephen Ramage. I'm representing the private sector here. Prior to joining What Three Words, I worked for the British government. I ran the international business for Ordnance Survey, the National Mapping Agency, and I've been involved with UN-GGIM for about 5 years. My former boss was one of the inaugural co-chairs. And I think before UN-GGIM, the global geospatial information management landscape was fragmented. There were many individual efforts and there was a lot of duplication. And I think now what you see through UN-GGIM is a common platform for discussion, for sharing good practice. But from the private sector, it's also incredibly useful to be able to speak to ministers in one place and explain what you're doing. And the company I work for has created a global addressing system, a location referencing global addressing system, which is free. Every single citizen in the world, every person can access this for free on Android or iOS. And that has a huge impact. If you think about land, land doesn't have an address. Land is usually in the rural area, and it's very expensive to address these parts of the world. So we're giving a location reference to land parcels. We're working with the government of South Africa on the Rural Development and Land Reform Programme. They have a programme called One Household, 1 Hectare, and they're giving an address to each person who has that. And that's going to help long-term sustainability and apply to the Sustainable Development Goals. But giving that address, that can also be used for many different things. It can be used for census. As you do a census, you need an address. You need to know where people are. Yes, we have GPS coordinates, but those are not human-friendly. So we've created a human-friendly system that can be used for anything from census to land administration to even travel and tourism or logistics. Because Dr. Lee made the point about food and about food security and about the availability and the land in Africa, but you still have to get the food delivered. You still have to know where it's going. You still have to make sure it's fresh and viable. And all of that is underpinned by knowing where to deliver it, having an address. So it's fantastic to be here as a private sector. We're working with other private sector organisations. I've just participated in a panel with ESRI, Digital Globe, there are others here, Trimble, and we're working with these multi-billion-dollar companies to help the member states to get towards some of the situations where there's more public-private partnerships and where people can more freely access data and information. So I'd like to thank the Ethiopian government, UNECA and UN-GGIM for enabling the private sector to also be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Yes, at the end, issues that I think you can direct now your questions to either any of the panel members on my left or on my right. So please feel free. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Shifarao with Xinhua News Agency, Chinese news agency. My question is regarding to issues related to first, when we think of land resources, the first thing that comes to our mind is that food production. So when you talk about food production, the first thing that comes into our mind is that smallholder farmers in Africa who have contributed a lot in the food security. So in your deliberations, I think we see the theme is good land governance. for sustainable development. So, to what extent you have deliberated on issues related to the policies that help protect and ensure the rights and benefits of smallholder farmers in Africa? Thank you.
The U.S. representative, he mentioned about the 2020 census briefly, and I just want to know more about this, the purpose of this census and what kind of data you are planning to get, and which countries have you already selected in Africa. Thank you very much.
That needed to be taken to further ground the practical use of geospatial information. What are the critical measurements should be taken in this area to further ground the use of geospatial information in the area of productive?
Generally, censuses are really the domain of each individual nation, and what drives those censuses are either constitutions, legislation, or just a general need. Stefan will maybe help me on this a little bit if I get too deep into this. So, for example, in the United States, our Constitution requires that we conduct a census every 10 years. But in other countries, there are different drivers for whether or not and when a census is conducted and how frequently it's conducted. So, for example, in Canada and Australia, they do their censuses every 5 years, for example. The issue is really to do a collection of the population, to know where they are. So we're not just collecting national level sets of information. The goal is really to use the results of whatever data is collected as part of a census for that country to be used for a variety of different purposes. In many nations of the world, they're not simply capturing population information, they're also capturing at the same time agricultural information or environmental information. And so the level of geography to which they collect that information and the level of geography to which they report out that information determines how much one can use that information for decision-making, planning, for program development, all kinds of activities. So it's a critical component of knowing what the state of your country is at that time. I believe in Ethiopia they're planning a census in 2018. So here we are, 2016. They're probably beginning that process of the planning process. That was our rationale for having this side event, was to say, the 2020 round of censuses, and it's not in any one given year, but it's across a spectrum of years. You need to begin planning for that now. This is usually the largest single civilian activity that a country will undergo because many people are hired and brought on to help conduct the census. And I know in the United States we're a large geographic country, so we hire lots of people to conduct that census, and they're there for a very short period of time. But the results are absolutely critical to the nation in terms of its planning for its economic development, for its population planning purposes. All those kinds of things are factors that result from the census. In the United States, for example, our democracy is based on the census in that the Congress, the members of Congress, the number of representatives for each state are determined from the census. That's why the Constitution has that. Now, many other countries don't have that requirement, but that's the requirement for one particular country. Other countries have other mandates or other requirements. So, but the overall importance of the census is the data that's collected and the information it says about its population, its economy, its environment, its agriculture, and so forth. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Oliver, you're the director of the Africa Center for Statistics. I'm sure this touches on your area of work. You want to add something to this?
Yes, please. Thank you, Director and Moderator. Just to remind colleagues here that one of the activities to a census is what we call cartographic mapping. And the work that we've seen here in the last 3 days really hinges on that before you actually undertake a census, there's need to know where the populations are in a country. So as we speak, I would imagine Ethiopia, they prepare for 2018 census. They're also doing some cartographic work, which is basically the geo-information we're talking about. They need to have maps to delineate and be able to tell where the populations are. And I think that for the 2020 census, this is very, very important for all African countries. That probably to also provide an opportunity to have all countries, and like in the last 2010 round, where we only had about 49 countries undertaking census, but this time around with this technology, we expect all countries really to participate in the census, to have the highest number of countries having population count in their countries. And therefore, the forum that we had here comes in a very timely manner to sort of provide a good opportunity for countries to think through what kind of technology can they actually borrow from here and apply in own countries to ensure that there's a quick count of populations and also quick release of the data, unlike in the previous census. So there is this has really been a good opportunity for African countries. And as the center responsible for, I mean, the department that is responsible, or rather the division that is responsible for the census, will be providing assistance to countries. And one area that will be doing so is actually providing guidance in the cartographic area, in the geoinformation, to ensure that they have the right information before they actually undertake a census. Thank you.
Yeah, there was a question about policies that may or may not have been discussed during the forum to protect small-scale farmers. I wanted to pass on the floor to the representative.
We are not decision makers. So the most important thing is that we produce all the information for the decision makers for the planning in the government. For example, for the agriculture or for the small farmers, with the geospatial information for satellite images, you can follow all the growing up of the agriculture in each part. You can identify if there is something going wrong in these parcels of the government. So this is the most important thing that we produce, and we give all the tools for the decision makers for that. Before, the years before, they didn't have that in all over the world. So now they are using more and more and more. Even there is a by the statistical side, there is an area that is made AgriStat that has all the samples for these agricultural issues. So using satellite images, so they decide where is how is going on the growing up of these agricultural issues.
Thank you very much. And then the one question was on the critical measurements.
Recommendations and the lessons learned from such forums. And in this respect, as our colleague Rolando rightly said, the purpose of this forum is to make recommendations. We are not policy making or on behalf of individual countries or a decision-making entity on behalf of individuals. The purpose of such forums is to make recommendations for decision makers, for policy makers to follow. So it is up to the implementing agencies. In the case of Ethiopia, it will be up to the Ethiopian Mapping Agency to take home the lessons learned from such forums, the experiences learned from such forums, and try to implement this in our country. So in individual countries are expected to learn to take home what they have learned and the recommendations of such forums, and then try to bring this to the attention of their respective governments, respective policy decision makers, so that the recommendations will be implemented on the ground. If I have understood you correctly, that's how we do it.
Thank you. Now, final two questions, please. Yes, at the back.
Okay, thank you very much again. My question is to the UN. Is there any time frame that is set for global or for developing countries to have their information, organized well and have some kind of database globally accessible for any use? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And one more? I guess not. Okay, so we'll start with two answers from my left, and then I'll come.
I should say, we have been collecting data from all countries around the world for 70 years. So if you go to our website at the United Nations Statistics Division in New York, you'll find data on all areas, economic, social, demographic, environmental, for all countries, well, not for always, we're helping countries around the world to improve their data. Now, the Statistical Commission and so sets the standards for global data collection, but there is no specific time frame. But having said that, of course, now we have a policy dynamics, which is the 2030 development agenda. And just recently we have discussed that we have proposed now a framework of 231 indicators that is the type of information that the countries would need to follow all the 17 goals. And now this will become, of course, the focus of our work for the next 15 years. So, I mean, we want to help countries as soon as possible to come up with that type of information, and making the connection back to geospatial information, and also responding to your questions. How do we do this now concretely? We have a working group under the GGIM that will identify which of those indicators and which of those goals have geospatial dimensions, and what are the measures that we will need, so that we can help countries as soon as possible, hopefully within the next 1 to 5 years maximum, to build up their information systems nationally, both statistical systems and geospatial information systems, to be able to measure progress towards these 17 development goals that we will all, as a global family, follow until 2030. And in that context, if I just may make the connection back to the census is, of course, also a global United Nations program, and every 10 years we have what is called the Global Census Round. 2010 was the last one. I was just checking on my website. It said that 214 countries and regions in the world conducted a census around 2010. That was the last round. Now for 2020, we are trying to improve those numbers even more so that everybody is counted. This is really the moment where we are knocking on the door of every person on this planet to collect their information, which is very important. Also in the spirit of the 2030 development agenda, that nobody is left behind. And the 2020 census round will, of course, be an enormous opportunity for what I call the marriage between geospatial and statistical information, because the census has been around for thousands of years, and the Bible is a reference to the census. The population was counted. But I mean, we have been collecting primarily statistical information, but with the new technologies, you have handheld devices, you can do what we call geocoding of all of the information of every person. That will help us to build much more powerful databases for analysis and understanding of economic, social, demographic, and environmental development. So I think the 2020 census, which, as my colleagues all mentioned, is in the planning phase right now, will be a tremendous opportunity for us to improve the information systems around the world in all countries. Thank you.
So I didn't think anybody would actually use the word geocoding in this section. But, the United Nations Development Programme have estimated that there are 4 billion people without an address. 4 billion people. And yesterday we heard about informal settlements in peri-urban areas and people who live in rural areas from UN Habitat. There's an estimated 900 million people living in those areas. By 2030, that number will be 3 billion. So this geocoding that they talk about is really quite important, being able to give an address. And the government of Ethiopia is working on a national address infrastructure as we speak. And so are many, many other countries around the world and in Africa. And one of the things that UN-GGIM is working on is something called the Statistical Spatial Framework. And as part of that, geocoding is being addressed. So I think there's a long way to go, because there are some of these big fundamental issues. Yes, we have the internet. Yes, we have people connected, but there's still a lot of people we have to give an address to, and that's fundamental for their social, for social and economic well-being. So I think that's an important point to get across.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Lee wants to say a few words on that.
About the colleagues. 2020 is the year to have a precious data of the world. It means statistics, but also the maps. That's why I think 2020 is the year to have one reference, one map, and one monitoring system for the world. It including Africa, Asia, every part of the world. That will be the basis geopolitics. A map, it means all the private government will share the map to support census, to support other purpose. A reference, it means the world will have one reference system for X, Y, and elevations. That is also a very huge job. The third one is one monitoring system. We will need all countries to share satellite capabilities and also airplanes and other sensors to keep track of the changes of the globe every year, even every month. I think this target is possible to realize in year 2020 to support our census and support other activities. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, and thank you all the panel members for providing this very useful information. It's always from the side of the layman, laywoman. It's sometimes difficult to decipher, this information, but you have really made it easy for us, and I'm sure it's easy for you journalists. Thank you very much again. Let's meet again soon. Thank you.